It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of morning that smells like wood smoke and wet leaves, and I was pulling a shepherd's pie out of the oven when my phone rang. It was my son-in-law's number. I almost didn't answer. We hadn't spoken in 3 weeks, not since the dinner where his mother had looked across my kitchen table and told my daughter, loud enough for everyone to hear, that she had settled. But something made me pick up. The voice on the other end wasn't his. Gran. It was barely a whisper. Gran, I need you. I'm at the trailhead on the Gatineau side, the old one, past the fire road. Please don't call anyone else. Please, just come. It was my granddaughter, Isla. She was 8 months pregnant. I didn't ask questions. I turned off the oven, grabbed my coat and my keys, and I drove. I need to tell you something about Isla before I go any further, because you need to understand what kind of person she is. She has never asked me for anything easily. Not when she was small. Not when she was a teenager who cried into her pillow instead of calling me. Not when she married into that family 2 years ago, and I watched something quiet and careful come over her face at the wedding reception, like a door closing gently. Isla doesn't ask for help, which means when she does, you run. She was sitting at the base of a birch tree about 40 meters from where the gravel ended. Her coat was torn at the shoulder. There was mud on her hands, and her face was the color of old paper. She was holding her belly the way you hold something you're terrified of dropping. I dropped to my knees on the frozen ground beside her, and I didn't say a word. I just put my arms around her, and I felt her shaking. I walked out, she said. I walked out because I was afraid to stay. She told me the rest in the car with the heat turned all the way up and a blanket from my back seat around her shoulders. We were already on the 148 heading toward the Pontiac Hospital when the whole story came out, not in order, not cleanly, the way people tell you things when they've been holding them too long and they finally crack open. Her mother-in-law, Constance, had been at the house that morning. Her husband, Fletcher, had left early for work, or said he had. Constance had come by to help, she said. That's what she always said, to help. But the help always came with a tax. That morning, the tax was a conversation Isla hadn't been prepared for. Constance sat down at the kitchen table, folded her hands, and told my granddaughter that she had spoken to Fletcher, that they had agreed, together, the two of them, without Isla, that when the baby came, Isla would go back to work within 6 weeks, and that the baby would be cared for by Constance full-time in Constance's home in Almonte, 45 minutes away. Isla said she told them no, that she wanted to take her full parental leave, that in Canada she was entitled to up to 18 months, and she had been planning and saving for it. And Constance had looked at her, this woman who had spent 2 years picking at my granddaughter like something on the bottom of her shoe, and she had said, "You're not really the maternal type, are you? I think you know that too deep down. Fletcher sees it. I see it. That baby deserves better than what you're going to give it." I kept my eyes on the highway, my hands on the wheel. I did not say what I wanted to say. "Then she left," Isla said. "She just stood up and left. And I sat there for I don't know how long, and then I put on my coat and I walked. I don't even know why I ended up at the trail. I just kept walking." She pressed her forehead against the car window. "She's been saying things like that for months, Gran. Small things, little comments about how I cook, about how I keep the house, about what I eat when I'm pregnant. Fletcher doesn't say anything when she does it. He never says anything." I signaled and moved into the right lane. "And last week," Isla said, and her voice went very quiet, "I heard them on the phone. Fletcher and her. I wasn't supposed to. I came back from my prenatal appointment early. He was in the kitchen and he said—" She stopped, swallowed. He said that maybe his mother was right, that maybe he had made a mistake, that he wasn't sure I was who he thought I was. We drove the rest of the way to the hospital in silence. The doctor confirmed she was fine. The baby was fine. They kept her for 3 hours, monitors and measurements, and a very kind nurse from Pembroke who brought her decaf tea and didn't ask questions. I sat in the chair beside the bed, and I held her hand, and I thought about what I was going to do, because I am 63 years old, and I have spent a significant portion of those years keeping my mouth shut when I shouldn't have. swallowing my anger out of politeness, giving people the benefit of the doubt long past the point where the doubt ran out. My late husband used to say I had the patience of the Canadian Shield. Slow to move, but once I did, you felt it. He was right. And I had been patient long enough. My daughter, Isla's mother, lives in Victoria. She had flown out twice during the pregnancy, and she and Isla talked every day, but she didn't know any of this. Isla had been protecting everyone. That's what she did. She protected people from the things that were happening to her, because she had grown up watching me do the same thing, and I hate that. I hate that I taught her that. From the hospital room, while Isla slept, I called my daughter. She didn't yell, she went very quiet, which is worse. She asked me 3 times if Isla was safe. I told her yes, 3 times. Then she said, "Mom, what do we do?" "I'll tell you what I'm going to do," I said. "I'm going to find out exactly what we're dealing with." Isla came home with me that night. She didn't argue. I made up the guest room with the flannel sheets and the heavy quilt, and I put a glass of water on the nightstand, and I sat on the edge of the bed while she fell asleep, the way I used to when she was small and stayed over on weekends. In the morning I made oatmeal with maple syrup and sliced pear, and I sat across from her at my kitchen table in Aylmer, and I let her eat half of it before I said anything. "I want to know everything," I said. "Not to upset you, but I need to know everything before I do anything." And she told me. It started before the wedding. Small things. Constance had opinions about the venue. They had it at a heritage barn in the Gatineau Hills, which Isla had loved, but Constance had wanted the Brook Street in Ottawa and made sure everyone knew it. Then opinions about the guest list, about the dress, about the fact that Isla's family is from the West and doesn't really know how things are done here, which Constance said at the rehearsal dinner, laughing like it was a joke. After the wedding, it was the house. They had bought a semi-incarnata, a nice one, and Constance had views on the furniture, the curtains, the neighborhood. She had a key. Fletcher had given it to her without asking Isla. She came by unannounced. Regularly. When Isla got pregnant, it escalated. Comments about her prenatal vitamins, about her decision to give birth at the Civic instead of going to a midwifery clinic, about her plan to breastfeed, which Constance called fashionable nonsense, about her work. Isla is a landscape architect, good at it, respected, and Constance had never once in 2 years asked her a single question about her job. And Fletcher, who had seemed, when they were dating, like someone who understood Isla, who had driven 6 hours to surprise her on her birthday when she was working on a project in Kingston, who had read the books she recommended and talked about them seriously and made her feel, for the first time in a long time, like someone was actually paying attention. Fletcher, who had, somewhere in the 2 years since the wedding, stopped paying attention entirely, who came home late and left early, and when Constance was at the house smiled and laughed at her jokes, and never once looked at his wife's face to see what was happening there. "Do you think he knows what she is?" I asked Isla. She was quiet for a long time. "I think he's always known," she said. "I think he finds it easier not to." I called my brother that afternoon. His name is Wendell. He is 67, recently retired from 32 years as a Crown attorney in Ottawa, and he has a mind like a steel filing cabinet. Everything organized, nothing lost, nothing forgiven without just cause. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is one of his skills. When I finished, he said, "She needs her own legal advice, independent of Fletcher. Today." "I know," I said. "And the house, is it in both their names?" "I believe so. Find out, and find out about the joint accounts. She needs to know where she stands before he does. That is the other thing about Wendell. He spent 32 years making sure people who thought they were untouchable found out they were wrong. He's very good at it." He drove up from his place in the Glebe that evening, and he sat at my kitchen table with Isla, and he explained things to her carefully and without drama. Her rights under the Family Law Act, what parental leave actually meant under the Employment Insurance Program, and yes, she was entitled to the extended parental benefits, up to 18 months, and no, her mother-in-law's opinion on the matter was not legally relevant. What she should do first, what she should document. Isla sat there with her hands around a mug of tea, and for the first time in days she looked like herself. like she was standing on solid ground. "You're not behind," Wendell told her. "You just need to start today instead of tomorrow." The next morning, I drove her to meet with a family lawyer, a woman Wendell recommended, sharp and unhurried, with an office near the Byward Market. I sat in the waiting room while they talked for 90 minutes. When Isla came out, she stood in the doorway for a moment and I watched her face. It was the face of someone who has just been handed a map after wandering for a long time. She had her own account by the end of the week. She had documented, with dates and details, every incident she could remember: the comments, the unannounced visits, the phone calls she had overheard. She filed for a formal parental leave notice through Service Canada, so it was on record, and her employer, a firm in Gatineau, was notified and fully supportive. Fletcher called 4 times the first day she was at my house. She didn't answer. On the second day he came to my door. I answered it. He's 34 years old, and he's not a bad-looking young man. And he stood on my porch in the November cold with his hands in his jacket pockets and said that Isla needed to come home. That this was between him and her. That this was between him and her. That her grandmother was interfering. I looked at him for a long moment. "You drove 40 minutes to stand on my porch and tell me I'm interfering," I said. "Where were you when your mother was in your kitchen telling your 8 months pregnant wife she wasn't maternal enough to raise her own child?" He opened his mouth. "Don't," I said. "I've been polite to your family for 2 years. I am done being polite. Isla is safe. She is healthy. The baby is healthy. And she will come home when she decides to come home, and not 1 minute before. If you'd like to speak with her, she has a lawyer. I suggest you get one too." I closed the door. I stood in my hallway for a moment with my back against the door, and I thought about my husband, who had been gone 11 years, and about how he used to say that I always did the right thing, just about 6 months too late. And I thought, not this time. Constance called me 2 days later. I don't know how she got my number, but I wasn't surprised. People like Constance always have ways of getting things they aren't given. She called at 7:30 in the morning, and when I answered, she started talking before I could say a word. She was calm. That's what I remember most. Not angry, not upset. Calm. Like she was explaining a situation to someone who had misunderstood the terms of a transaction. She said Isla was being dramatic. She said her comments had been meant with care, that she was just concerned about the baby, about the well-being of her grandchild. She said I was encouraging Isla to break up a family over nothing. She said that people like me, and she paused just slightly before, people like me, enough for me to notice. People like me didn't understand how things worked in a close family. I let her finish. Then I said, "Constance, your son is 34 years old, and from what I can see, you've been making his decisions since before he could walk. I feel sorry for him, genuinely. But I am not going to feel sorry for you. Isla is my granddaughter. That is my great-grandchild. And if you come near either of them again without an invitation, I will consider it harassment. My brother can explain the relevant provisions. I think you know who he is." A silence. "Good morning," I said, and I hung up. I poured myself a second cup of coffee, and I stood at my kitchen window looking out at the backyard, at the bare maples and the bird feeder I hadn't taken in yet, swinging in the November wind. The baby was born on the 14th of December. A girl, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, born at the Ottawa Civic with my daughter, who had flown in from Victoria the week before and was sleeping in my second guest room, in the room, and me in the waiting area outside, knitting badly and crying without quite meaning to. My daughter came out first. She looked at me, and she didn't say anything. She just nodded, and I understood everything from that one small nod. Isla named her Wren. I held her 40 minutes after she was born. I sat in the hospital chair with this tiny, solid weight in my arms, and I looked at her face, which was red and squashed and absolutely perfect, and I thought about everything that had happened in the past 6 weeks, all the phone calls and legal documents and hard conversations and closed doors, and I thought it was worth it. Every bit of it was worth it. Isla, from the bed, watched me holding her daughter, and she smiled, the full, unguarded smile I hadn't seen on her face in 2 years, and she said, "I've been thinking about what to ask you." I looked up. "Will you be her grandmother? Like, really, the way you were for me?" I had to look back down at Ren because I couldn't keep my face together. "I've been her grandmother since October," I said, "since the Gatineau trailhead. You're just catching up. Isla and Fletcher are separated. It is not clean or easy. These things never are. But Ren has a father who, when he is not under his mother's roof, is slowly, cautiously, learning how to show up. The lawyer Wendell recommended is good, and the process is moving. Isla is on extended parental leave, the full 18 months she planned for, and she comes to my house for Sunday dinner every week without fail. My daughter went back to Victoria in January, but she calls every other day. She called last week to say she's been looking at property in the Pontiac. I didn't ask her to. Constance has not contacted Isla again. I don't know what her son told her. I don't need to know. Wendell comes for dinner on the last Friday of every month. He brings wine from the LCBO, usually something from the Niagara Peninsula, because he is loyal to Ontario grapes. And we sit at my kitchen table long after we've finished eating, and we talk about everything, the way we have since we were children. Last month, he held Ren for the first time. She grabbed his index finger and held on the way babies do, like they already know who to trust. He looked up at me over her head with an expression I hadn't seen on his face in years. "That," he said quietly, "is what it's all for." Outside, the snow was coming down across the Gatineau hills, slow and quiet and absolute, the way it does in December in this part of the world, covering everything old and hard and difficult under something clean. Ren didn't let go of his finger for a long time. I keep thinking about that shepherd's pie sitting on the counter going cold while I drove out to the Gatineau trailhead. Such a small thing. But I think that's how life actually works. The moments that change everything don't announce themselves. They arrive in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, and what matters is whether you're paying attention. I wasn't always. I'll be honest about that. For years, I told myself that staying quiet was a form of kindness, that not pushing back was keeping the peace. But keeping the peace and letting wrong things happen in silence aren't the same thing, and somewhere along the way I confused them. What I passed on to Isla without meaning to was the habit of absorbing pain and calling it patience. It took seeing her at the base of that birch tree, 8 months pregnant, coat torn, shaking, for me to understand the cost of that particular lesson. What changed things wasn't anger, though there was plenty of that. What changed things was clarity. Wendell sitting at my kitchen table explaining to Isla, calmly and without drama, exactly what her rights were. The lawyer near the Byward Market handing her a map when she'd been wandering. Isla opening a bank account in her own name and filing her parental leave notice through Service Canada. Not dramatic gestures, but precise ones. Intelligent ones. The kind that come from understanding your situation clearly instead of just reacting to it. That's the thing about people like Constance. They rely on confusion. They rely on you not knowing your options, not understanding the law, not having someone in your corner who does. The moment Isla had good information and good counsel, the whole architecture of what Constance had built started to come apart. Not because anyone raised their voice, because someone finally turned on a light. And Isla herself. I want to say something about who she showed herself to be through all of this. She walked out of that house on her own. She made the call. She sat across from me and told me everything even though it cost her something to do it. She went to that lawyer's office and she came out standing straighter. She didn't wait for someone to save her. She let herself be helped. Which is different and harder than it sounds for someone who has spent years protecting everyone else. That is its own kind of strength. Not the loud kind, the kind that holds when everything is pulling at it. I held Ren in that hospital room and I thought, this is what comes from all of it, from Isla doing the hard thing, from Wendell driving up from the glebe on a weeknight, from me finally closing the door on someone who deserved to have it closed. Not punishment exactly, just consequence. The natural consequence of people choosing to act with some integrity when it would have been easier not to. The snow was coming down when we drove home that December night, soft and steady over the Gatineau hills. Ren asleep in her car seat. Isla quiet in the passenger seat, looking out the window, my daughter in the back, already half asleep herself. I didn't need it to be more than that. It was enough.